Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Thursday morning, another danger zone kind of time to record before usually the end of the week deluge occurs.
That sounds like one of those '80s movie songs. Is that from Top Gun or something? Is there
Danger Zone's Danger is definitely a Top Gun song. I never watched Top Gun.
Me neither. Never saw it either. Can you believe that? What are the odds that two Gen X guys of a certain age will have both never seen that movie?
Well, I don't know about you, Matt. I have never been that macho.
I have been
I've never been that attracted to that world.
No, I used to watch movies like Predator and
I never saw Predator.
First Blood. Like I
never saw any of the Rambos. Never saw the Rambos.
By the way, let me just say, it's part of my mission in life is to get this out there. The original First Blood movie, not Rambo, but First Blood, is legitimately good. You should see it. I'm not joking. It's kind of
like Rocky. Like that's the good one. That's the one that some thought was put into it.
Yeah. Well, Rocky actually won Picture of the Year in 1976, I think.
Right.
I mean, so it was like a legitimate art. First Blood is actually very good in my opinion. People may laugh, but it's funny too because like two of my favorite movies are A Few Good Men and Jerry Maguire. Yet there's a whole bunch of Tom Cruise movies like Cocktail.
Never saw Cocktail.
And what's the one where he's like a pool hustler? Color Money,
yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Paul Newman is in that too,
yes.
I think. Never saw that one either.
I never saw that either, but that's because the notion of a whole movie about pool wasn't interesting. But all the other ones are sort of like this sort of straight up, let's revel in Tom Cruise's machismo. Whereas like Few Good Men is like sort of machismo on trial, and Jerry Maguire is machismo midlife crisis. Just sort of like, let's just watch guys fly fighter jets. Like, that had, like, zero appeal to me.
Yeah, I think, actually, I want to watch Top Gun, and I'm sure I've referenced it, like, the nickname Iceman, or, like, at different points, like, the Val Kilmer character. I mean, I know about it, having just been alive in the 1980s, but I've actually never really seen the movie. I actually think it's probably pretty good. Like, what's not to like about watching like jets, like it seems like I would like it.
I mean, I've never gone to an air show either. I just don't find it that appealing.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where like everybody has these cultural blind spots, and if you just like miss them, like I could have very easily I think I might have just been a couple years too young for Top Gun, and then I never caught up to it. You know what I mean? But again, like A Few Good Men is one of my top 10 movies. Like I love that movie, and so it's not a Tom Cruise problem.
I'm not even sure I saw that movie all the way through. I saw the play. I saw A Few Good Men on Broadway when I was a kid.
It is the most quotable. It's one of the. It's up there with Casablanca in terms of like. I would say Jerry Maguire and A Few Good Men are, as Jerry Maguire especially. I mean, there are. You Had Me at Hello, and Show Me the Money, and My Heart is Full. I mean, there are so many lines that are now part of like the lexicon or whatever that people don't even realize come from that movie.
Well, this walk down 1980s Tom Cruise memory lane is
and 90s.
It's always fascinating, but we should get down to business.
You're always cracking the whip, Bill Scher. Always. If it were up to me, this whole show would be us talking about things like that. Is there a market for that? Probably not. Would anybody listen? Probably not.
Now, I have a piece over at Real Clear Politics, which I don't think many people read. So here's a chance to delve into it.
I don't think many people read.
Why is Trump delivering to evangelicals in a much more robust way than he delivers for the white working class? And now, obviously, there's overlap between those constituencies. But so you go back to last several days, Trump, not only we talked about the Jerusalem embassy before, Trump moves the embassy to Jerusalem, not just, which you might think that's not evangelical, that's for the Jews, but it's the evangelical community, or at least a piece of it, that believes this is a necessary step to bringing about the second coming of Jesus. And
I want to jump in and just say, I think of the people who want to move it to Jerusalem, I think that constitutes a small minority of the rationale for moving it. I'm not saying it's not, that there are people like that.
I mean, as you wrote about me, he invited Robert Jeffers and John Hagee to give the benedictions at this ceremony. I mean, whatever is actually in Trump's mind as far as his reasons for doing it, it is a clear deliverance of a policy request from that faction of the evangelical community.
Right. And just, I mean, I think we talked about this before, but, you know, when I grew up in the evangelical community, I never heard this notion, which does exist, but I'd never even heard of this notion about this being a precondition for Jesus coming back. It was always like the Israel, you know, the Jews are God's chosen people. You have to, you know, you should be on their side because they're God's chosen people, and that's it.
I mean, this is why this is more striking. I mean, it's arguably not even what the majority of evangelicals, rank and file evangelicals, care about. Yet they did it in a way designed to to elevate the profile of the people who do believe that this is a necessary step to the second coming of Jesus Christ. I mean, it's gone far beyond like weird thing liberals talk about, obsessing about the fringes of the right, to like right in your face, giving them that spotlight at the event. And that was the front end of a previous week. Then it ends with the I'm not sure it was even formally announced, but the White House clearly fed it to the press that they're going to institute a regulation that would prevent Planned Parenthood from taking federal funding and performing abortions, or even referring people to abortions in other places. I mean, they could do it so long as they gave up their federal funding. So this is the defund Planned Parenthood wish list item that evangelicals have been complaining. You know, you're passing this omnibus bill that's not cutting them off. Trump's going to do it by executive orders. That's a straight up win.
Which I completely applaud and I support doing.
At the same week, Trump says, we're losing too many Chinese jobs. We got to save ZTE. And at the end of the week, Mnuchin goes on TV and says, we're going to put the trade war on hold. We got this great deal with China that has no details whatsoever. And trust me, it's all going to work out. Why is it that the evangelicals are getting much more love and attention from Trump than the forgotten man, the coal miner? Trump says nice things to them. He probably talks about them more in his stump speeches.
Yeah, and I think you would assume Trump is more like, personally, he's not a Christian. Well, he says
he personally has no tie to either of these camps whatsoever.
No, but I mean, I think his MO has always been, going back, for the one thing he's been consistent on is like protectionism, you know,
yes.
And saying that we're getting ripped off by somebody else. So if you were to say, like, in his heart, which of these two things is he actually invested in, you would probably say he's more invested in the working class populist argument than he is in the evangelical Christian argument.
You might think, but you know, proof of the pudding's in the eating. You know, look at what he's doing. And
so why is this?
So again, I can't know what's actually in Trump's mind, but I do think that Trump had a meeting with Pentecostals and charismatics in 2011, where he asked for their spiritual guidance on whether to run for president, and prayed with them. So it's not a Johnny-come-lately realization on Trump's part that he needs that community to be politically viable. He has thought about that for a much longer time than people
maybe this is just a result of the fact that there is an I hate to say organized, because Protestantism doesn't really have the hierarchy that would benefit it, but there are evangelical leaders. I don't know if on the right there are populist leaders.
Well, exactly.
There's not an army of there's not a leadership in waiting on the right who are like union leaders who could whisper into Trump's ear.
Right. No, I made the exact same point in the piece. So it's a combination of, I think, Trump recognizing.
Let's just be clear. I didn't read this piece either. Nobody read this piece.
But it's Trump recognizing that this is an integral part of a coalition he needs to win. Maybe even actually believing in their religious beliefs, but I can't read his mind, but I don't want to, and there's no reason to actually presume that considering how he's lived his life. But that combined with that there is an organized evangelical lobby. It's not a singular lobby. They're different, there's different leaders. And to the extent that there is a working class lobby, it's in the labor movement, which is basically part of the Democratic Party apparatus. And even then, most people in the white working class aren't union members. I mean,
don't you think, though, this is an argument for organizing and for having leaders, because I would argue that there are a lot more, I would guess there are a lot more votes that are sort of the populist working class votes out there for Trump to get than there are people who care about this somewhat obscure.
Well, then it comes down to
eschatological, or whatever the word is. Like,
what price does the non-evangelical white working class man or woman, what price do they have for their vote? They may cut Trump a lot more slack on China if they think, well, he's there's the case of a woman who lost her job, a carrier, after Trump came in and said, I'm going to save your jobs, didn't save her job. New York Times asked her, do you blame Trump for that? She says, absolutely not. With him 100%. He did his best.
Right. But if the Democrats nominate Sherrod Brown or Joe Biden, maybe there is another game in town, as opposed to if the Democrats nominate fill in the blank.
I mean, maybe, but that's a pretty big maybe.
That's a big if.
We're not seeing Trump in polls. Well, I should. There's conflicting data out there, so I shouldn't be definitive about this. I mean, on one hand, his national number is at his high water mark of around 43. And he only got 46% of the vote in the first place. So you could argue, well, he hasn't really shed that much support nationally, so it would seem. On the other hand, there are state polls that haven't been so good for him. He did lose. The Democrats did win Western Pennsylvania in the Conor Lamb race. Doug Jones did win in Alabama. So there's some indication that perhaps he has lost some support, or some support's not as motivated as it was before. So I don't think we can know exactly and pinpoint where your lunch pail worker feels about Trump today. But certainly Trump's making the bet that he can talk his way out of making these compromises when it comes to trade with the white working class.
Right.
But he's not dancing around the subject when it comes to the evangelical issues. I mean, there was a point, so when the tax bill passed, and here, tax is another example of something that the white working class got pretty much bupkis from. You had, some people in that coalition, and I just interviewed the folks, Selena Zito and Brad Todd, wrote The Great Revolt, and there's a Pew study that's along the same lines. Some of the Trump white working class voter have animus towards corporations, unlike your normal Republican voter. The tax bill has huge corporate tax breaks, huge corporate tax cuts, and not nearly as generous when it comes to white working class. Yet you did not see that much complaining from white working class about it. So though Conor Lamb did make that point and won his race. So let's keep that into account. After that bill passes, a few months later, there's a piece in McClatchy where a number of evangelical leaders are saying Trump's not doing enough for us. We're not going to turn out for him at the midterms if we don't get more. This tax bill is not enough. This omnibus bill didn't defund Planned Parenthood. We need, the judges are nice, but we need more. And it's a month after that piece runs that we get the Jerusalem embassy and we get the defund Planned Parenthood regulation. So they complained and got results. And you're not seeing the same kind of complaining from the white working class when it comes to these economic issues.
I would say a couple things. One, some of this could have to do with like what a president could do unilaterally versus what would require, congressional support. And if it does require congressional support, remember Trump's populism is not shared by a lot of Republicans in Congress, but Trumpism and Ryanism are united on the religious issues. So it may be that Trump is able to deliver for Christians because he has allies in Congress on those issues, and he does not have them when it comes to tariffs and economic populist issues. I'm sure you made that point too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main point is that we need to recognize that Trump is a whatever his I interviewed Steve Strang on my podcast too, a New Books in Politics podcast. He wrote God and Donald Trump. Very favorable appraisal of Trump's relationship with the Christian conservative community. If you want to look at it as transactional and like completely phony on Trump's part, you can, but the bottom line is he is delivering for the social right in a way that very few presidents have.
No, that's a good point, Bill, and I think it's probably incumbent upon me to make this point, which is those of us who have criticized evangelicals and evangelical leaders for supporting Trump, despite his many, many, many problems and flaws, should acknowledge that from a strategic standpoint, maybe they had a point. You could argue that they did have a point and that they had just sort of become pragmatic. And they can argue that if your goal is to advance policies that are favorable to them, that the ends justify the means. I should also make another point, which is, and Philip Klein over at the Washington Examiner, I believe, wrote about this recently, but a lot of us conservative critics of Trump and the election were able to argue, look, Donald Trump isn't even a conservative. He gave money to Hillary. We can't trust him to be reliably conservative if he gets elected president. He loves publicity. He loves attention. Maybe he'll sell out to the media and try to win their praise and acclaim and sell out. And that hasn't happened either. So that removes an arrow from our quiver. I mean, it was convenient, and I think it was a legitimately defensible argument to make for us to basically hit him from the right and say that we don't trust that he's actually going to govern as a conservative. It's harder to make that argument now today. I'm still very concerned about Trump for other reasons, but it's harder to make some of the arguments that we were able to make the first time around.
Well, so let me shift gears to, I know, a piece you have in the hopper at Daily Beast.
Literally in the hopper. Not literally in the hopper. Not literally, but it is being edited.
Should be published by the time this show is uploaded.
Because isn't a hopper like something for that farmers use or something? What's a hopper?
I defer to you, salt of the earth.
Look this up.
White working class Matt Lewis.
Is it like? I feel like a hopper might be a farming thing. What's a hopper?
I don't know.
Okay. Hit us up in the comments.
So you gave a critical assessment of the effectiveness of Senator Jeff Flake as a conservative Trump critic. He just gave a convention speech where he really laced into Trump, probably maybe in his toughest words yet. But at the same time, this is the guy's getting chased out of the party. He had to abandon his reelection campaign. Hasn't made any discernible legislative accomplishments that get crosswise with Trump. It is the fact that, let me put it this way. We know that those who believe in making transactional peace with Trump on the right are getting something out of the deal. They can at least say, I had a philosophy of accepting Trump's flaws and getting something in return. I'm getting something in return. You can at least say that for me. Those who want to make the broader point that Trump is corrosive to democracy and corrosive to the rule of law and corrosive to our values and morals, is there something to say there still? Is there currency on the right at all for that argument to say, look, it doesn't matter if you're getting something for this deal. It doesn't matter you're defunding Planned Parenthood. It doesn't matter we move the embassy in Jerusalem. There's a bigger problem here. There's a cancer on the American system because of Trump, and you have to give up something. You have to give up what you're getting out of this deal to deal with that problem.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think that this is actually if someone believes that they need to go on the record and stand up against what they're seeing, then they need to do that. You know what I mean? And far be it from me to question that. But I do think it's fair to, so that's like a moral decision, but I do think it's fair to question like the merit, like not the merits, but the efficacy of doing that. Like, which is the more effective route? We just talked about the evangelicals. And they could theoretically actually help guide Trump and maybe keep him from doing something. If they're whispering in his ear, they could maybe keep him from doing something crazy if they wanted to. I don't know. But when you declare war on Trump, is that virtue signaling and grandstanding, or is that going on the record standing up to him? I would say in the case of Flake, I just don't know how effective it has been, to be honest with you. The only actual, in my opinion, the only actual deliverable that we know has come from Flake's bold stance is that the Senate will not have Jeff Flake. Jeff Flake will not be in the Senate next year. What else has he accomplished? And then there's people on the left who say Republicans need to stand up and call this guy out. But when Jeff Flake does it, I still hear people on the left say, yeah, but he votes with Trump 90% of the time. So it's almost a thankless thing to do. What do you think, though, Bill?
Well, I've largely agree with you on this point. It's not fair to expect a conservative who criticizes Trump to vote against conservative legislation just because Trump likes it. That's not that's not understanding what the conservative critique of Trump is. The critique of Trump is not that he wants to repeal Obamacare. It's that Trump is there's substantive critiques. I don't agree with him on trade policy, for example. I think he wants to spend more money than I would. I don't think he's going to contain the deficit. There's that complaint. And there's the more existential, Trump is bad for morality. Trump is defining our standards down. Trump is undermining democratic institutions. Trump's breaking the law as we speak.
I think it's harder to make the substantive critiques for the reasons we've just discussed. Right. I mean, there still are some, but I think to me, the big problem with Trump is the character questions, the authoritarian tendencies, the tweeting, the rhetoric, the chaos, the destruction of the damage he's doing to the fabric of the nation, things like that are harder. They're like more like I don't know, ethereal or philosophical sort of things, but very important, just harder to define.
So if it's that bad, and from what I'm hearing from Flake, he thinks it's that bad. He thinks Trump is seriously degrading American democracy at its foundation.
Yeah.
that does suggest that you should not be abetting his retaining of power by giving him policy wins. You might have to say, you know what? This is a 51-49 Senate, and you don't have my vote for things, President Trump, because I need to prioritize getting you out of here. You're not just bad for my party, you're bad for the country. And once I get you out of here, I'll get back to helping with conservative policies. But I'm putting this first and foremost.
If Trump was Hitler and Hitler wanted to do something about build a really great highway, an Autobahn, you should be against that, because I don't think you could. I think that you would have to be in complete resistance to Hitler. You could not give him any wins. I don't think Trump is Hitler. I don't think we're there. And so I think that what you do, and this is really the question.
Is Trump Chavez?
What's that?
You mean Trump may not be Hitler, but is he Chavez? Is he trying to undermine the rule of law that he is above the law?
Yeah. I think that, my personal opinion, I think that Trump is an authoritarian at heart, but luckily the American institutions are strong enough that I believe we are containing him. So I don't think that we're at the existential point where you should go full opposition on everything, even if you think it's good. So if he does something that I think is right or good, I think you support it. If he does something that is bad or wrong, you should call it out. And continue, so, but this is, I mean, these questions are really more strategic than they are values-based. This is a question of, like, what is the best way to contain Trump, to get him to behave properly. And it's the reason that I'm interested in Flake is actually as a case study to help us learn how, because Bill, you tell me if I'm wrong, but Jeff Flake has really, in a way, boldly and courageously gone on the record of calling out Trumpism and the damage that Trump is doing to liberal democracy. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the only outcome that has gotten from this is that we'll have one less Jeff Flake in the U.S.
I think that's 100% correct. I think you could argue Flake has set back his own cause. If you agree with Flake, you're going to lose your job. You're going to you're going to prove that this belief within the Republican Party is a non-starter, and if you're going to get into the Republican Party, don't copy it.
Yeah.
So, but I want to pull back a little bit farther, and excuse me if I'm being overly speculative here. I was really struck by the stories about how Elliot Brody, if I'm pronouncing his name right, and George Nader have been working with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Israel, both before the election and after the election. This really expands the whole notion of what we mean by collusion to not just doing what Putin wants, but doing what certain players in the Middle East want. And we know what Putin's game is. Putin wants to have a sphere of influence around Russia where he can kind of quasi-reassemble the Soviet Union, if not quite in name, but in practice, and not be named and shamed by the international community on human rights violations. And wanting a president who says, human rights, that's not my thing. Go do what you want to do. In the case of Saudi Arabia, not Qatar, I'm sorry, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Israel, excuse me, my mistake before. They don't like Qatar. They were rattled by Obama's Iran deal, which Russia actually supported, which was a part of. So there's a bit of tension there. But they felt that Obama was recalibrating the balance of power in the region, so there would be a balance between Sunni and Shia, and maintain peace in that way. These guys don't want Iran getting normalized and getting back in the mix. They want to isolate them, and they apparently went as far. We don't know exactly how far Saudi Arabia and Israel and UAE did. I don't know if it actually crossed the line to illegality or not based on what's been reported, but they certainly had the meeting. They certainly had the interest of wanting to side with Trump over Clinton, and we saw how they reacted to Trump. I mean, they basically openly said, we support Trump for trashing the Iran deal, touch my orb, and we'll show our solidarity with you. The rule of law, arguably, is being undermined in service to this recalibration of foreign policy, which people on the right, whether they are pro-Trump or anti-Trump, are not that upset about. They don't like the Iran deal either.
By the way, Bill, and this could change by the time we're done taping it, but we're in the danger zone here.
Yeah.
Trump pulls out of North Korea summit.
So. Not totally shocking, although I don't know if that's going to be the end of that story either.
Yeah, who knows? By the time this is up, maybe he's back in.
Right.
You never know.
You're talking about the rule of law is kind of a vague, abstract concept to most people, and I don't think most people really care, except for how it affects them personally. If you're a Democrat or you're a liberal, you hate the Trump's undermining the rule of law because it's keeping him in power and he's preventing you from getting the things that you want. And if you are a certain kind of conservative, you may not like that he's undermining the rule of law because it conflicts with your sense of moral decency, or it conflicts with your policy preferences on budget or trade. But I think there's an underlying driver here in terms of American foreign policy, which conservatives are not at odds with Trump on, for the most part. You think they might be at odds with Trump. It's about being too nice to North Korea, which now Trump is pulling away with. Here an example of John Bolton, I think, showing his. John Bolton actively sabotaged this summit by equating it to the Libya model, which Trump tried to pull away from, but it would appear that pissed off North Korea enough that they started making some moves. It started like a bad deal for Trump, and Trump said, "I don't like the way it's looking in the press. I'm out of here." Now, I happen to think Trump really would like to say, my deal is better than Obama's deal. My North Korea deal is better than Obama's Iran deal. And who cares what the details are? But that's certainly not where John Bolton's at. I think John Bolton has, thrown his weight around here. But considering Trump's mercurial nature, I don't know if we can say that's the end of the story. I do think, just to tie off my monologue here, if conservatives are going to prioritize these rule of law issues, I think it requires some sacrifice of policy wins that they would normally accept. I don't know how they can square that otherwise.
It's, Trump has put us in a very difficult position of making these calls, and I don't necessarily think it's clear what the right answer is. I have made a decision as an opinion journalist that I will wake up each day, and I have a memory, but I will basically judge everything he does by the merits of that thing as best I can, and kind of call him like I see him. And I've written a ton of pieces, of course, about the larger damage that I think he's doing to the movement and to the country and to the rule of law. But if he does tax cuts or appoints a good Supreme Court justice, I will say so, right? I'm not just going to be pure opposition. But I do think that there's an argument that, if you really care about the country and you really want to keep Trump from doing something crazy, get close to him. And because if you don't, the only people whispering in his ear are going to be Steve Miller and Steve Bannon. And so,
even that's not a foolproof scenario, because plenty of people who have been close to him get ignored too. He delights in doing the opposite of what his advisors want to say.
There's no, and then you risk, when you do that, your reputation has been tarnished. You are now seen as a sellout. It's really a very precarious position. I feel like I've tried to do it. I feel like I've so far come out of the Trump era okay, but I don't have the same responsibility that elected members have. You know what I mean? Like, in a way, I have the luxury of saying whatever I want. Thank God we live in a country where I can do that
for now,
without being hauled off to jail or something. But you know, so I don't think it's fair for me, because I have the luxury of just being able to like call them like I see them. Like, other people in other positions, you know, they may make a different call, and Trump has just put us in a very bad spot. And I think we're still trying to figure out what's tis nobler, you know, what's the right, most honorable way to catch more. Do you catch more flies with honey or vinegar? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. I think the verdict is still out on this.
I jump quickly. I need to jump soon. Just a little bit about the primaries this week, which didn't get as much attention, I think, as some other weeks. Although a lot of people looked at Amy McGrath's win in Kentucky. Here was someone who came out of nowhere, had a brilliant viral video showing off her breaking of the glass ceiling in the military, and managed to overcome Mayor Jim Gray, who was recruited by the DCCC, D-Trip, as Matt likes to say, although it never got the D-Trip's formal endorsement, and there's some indication the D-Trip was perfectly happy with McGrath winning. But McGrath was an outsider. She had not lived in the district until recently. She grew up in Kentucky, but in a different district. She was abroad because of her military service. And Jim Gray not only was mayor for a long time, but ran for Senate against Rand Paul and won in that congressional district in a Senate race. So he had some proven vote-getting ability there. But for whatever reason, she was polling well after starting behind Gray, but she had eclipsed him. Apparently, Gray's team recognized they were on their heels, dropped a negative ad on her in the final days, calling her a carpetbagger, which seemed to have backfired. I mean, he might have lost anyway. But it's an example of, Democrats are nominating a lot of women, but here's the case of a woman really beating a pretty well-funded and well-respected and well-liked. I mean, people liked Jim Gray. It wasn't like people were angry with him. But people in that district saying, you know, we want something different, and we like her personal story. This in many ways cuts against things that I have said. You know, number one, military veterans who don't have local ties tend not to do well in general elections, and it may be that McGrath will be one of those people come November. But the tracker there is actually quite poor for Democrats, and I point out in the primaries the week before, one of the women who lost a Pennsylvania primary was someone who came from outside the district. Her money came from outside the district. Even though she had more money than the person who beat her, the local guy, won. So I think there are a lot of examples where somewhat of McGrath's profile does not succeed, yet she had enough, I think, personal campaign skills, some innate skills, and a good personal story to overcome those challenges. Now, at the same time, in Texas, a lot of Texas runoffs, the biggest race, Texas 7, where the DCCC actively dropped opposition research on the more progressive candidate, which seemed to have backfired in the first round because she made it to the runoff, she got blown out in the runoff. So, the D-Trip gets kind of knocked. They didn't get their guy in Kentucky 6. They didn't get their person in Nebraska 2 the week prior. They totally got who they wanted in Texas 7. And in some of the other races that didn't get much attention, the establishment favored pick generally won in the Texas runoff. So I think we're going to end up with, and I think I'm reading a point of mine from last week, you're not going to have one kind of candidate in the Democratic field. There'll be some establishment faves. You're going to have some progressive faves. McGrath's not someone who the Bernie crats are behind.
And this is probably a feature, not a bug, in a midterm. But you guys are going to have to settle on a nominee in 2020.
Right. I mean, I think this is perfectly fine for winning the midterms.
Yeah.
It's not going to be fine for winning the internal Democratic argument over who has the right theory of the case.
Yep.
And we're going to be relitigating it anew as soon as the presidential primary start, which I think is going to be November 8th, 2018.
I'm excited about this. I hope I've talked a lot about Russia the last year, my friend. I would like to talk about what the Democrats are going to do in 2020.
Let's leave it on that note.
No, we can't leave it there. I have to update.
Okay.
A hopper. There are many definitions, but in terms of the expression, there are two that I think fit. One is a funnel-shaped chamber or bin in which loose material as grain or coal is stored temporarily, being filled through the top and dispensed through the bottom. Also, a hopper is a box in which a proposed legislative bill is dropped and thereby officially introduced. Who knew?
There you go.
Put that in the hopper.
You always learn something here on the DMZ.
Turns out dictionary.com does come in handy. How many things are we saying? How many expressions are we flagrantly throwing out there that we may not really know what they mean?
Before we go, I got to plug one thing. Very excited. You're going to want to listen to this, Matt. You're going to listen to this podcast of mine. I interviewed for New Books in Politics on the New Books Network Roderick Hart, who is a UT Austin professor of government and communication. He has a book called Civic Hope: How Ordinary Americans Keep Democracy Alive. He analyzed 10,000 letters to the editor from 12 cities over a 70-year period, from 1948 to the present, to get a better sense of what ordinary Americans actually believe and how they interact with their government. And his takeaway from it is a positive one, not a negative one, which you might not expect if you ever read the letters page. But his point is that it's these people, regardless of where they sit in the ideological spectrum, these are the people that keep democracy alive and functioning. And we need that spirit to soldier on. So it's a really interesting book. It's a really interesting conversation that we had. So I hope you check it out. How do we listen to that? Newbooksnetwork.com. I mean, it's my particular podcast, New Books in Politics, is available on iTunes, but you can see it at the newbooksnetwork.com homepage. Awesome. So I interviewed Tom Perriello, the former congressman and gubernatorial candidate in Virginia. For over an hour, we talked about all sorts of stuff: the royal wedding, faith, abortion, and why he thinks there's going to be a world war. So check that out. Well, that'll be less uplifting than my podcast. So depending on what your mood is, you take your pick. I'm allegedly interviewing Ian Bremmer about globalism later today, so we'll see how that goes. But all right. That's Matt Lewis and the news. All right. Until next week, sir. All right. See you guys. Thanks.